Okay, so day 57 is where and it could be, I think, today is because I had said that we would probably spend the rest of this month on, but we're moving a little bit quickly through the remaining, so we may not be exactly that. So interesting about day 57 is that the book is Lamrim Year, and the Lamrim is the sutra path teachings of the Buddha, and really you find in Tibetan Buddhism that there's generally a pretty stark division between sutra and tantra. Not entirely true. There's the easy path text, which does combine a Lamrim text with Vajrayana visualizations, which is considered to be a very powerful way of meditating on the Lamrim. So you find some text, but the easy path is unusual because it does that. And Lama Tsongkhapa generally, in particular, really kind of distinguishes. If you look at the foundation of all good qualities toward the end there, it says that by having become a pure vessel, by training in the general path, then I'm now suitable to take Vajrayana initiation. And of course, we've kind of touched on how it's a little bit, how initiation now is so widely available because the gurus see that the benefit of just getting imprints. Even if we're kind of pretending to practice, we get imprints by doing the kind of generation stage practices and so on. But here, it's alluded to the distinction between guru devotion in sutra versus in tantra on day 57, because he says, before we visualize the guru as inseparable from the deity, we need to lay the foundation of the sutra practice of guru devotion, which is kind of all of the things. There isn't really more about that, because again, this is a Lamrim text. But so all of the things that we have talked about in terms of training and seeing the guru as Buddha, and then training in making offerings, all of that is the sutra path. What is different about guru devotion on the tantric path is this idea of training in seeing the guru as Buddha. As we've seen on the sutra path, it's kind of broadly presented as just Dharmakaya mind, just sort of the primordial mind of all the Buddhas, and it kind of relating to the guru through just the sort of general idea of the Dharmakaya. Whereas for a tantric practitioner, they see the guru as a manifestation of the specific deity, that we're Yidam, that they have taken from that guru. So one's own Vajra master, they see as a manifestation of whichever deity they are relating, to them through, by virtue of having taken that particular highest yoga tantra initiation. So, he says, in the practice of guru devotion, according to the Mahayana Sutra, there's no instruction to stop the ordinary appearance of the guru, and there's no mention of visualizing the guru as the deity. And we've touched on how just in English, the word deity isn't, it comes with our Judeo-Christian sort of baggage, which isn't intended. It's another word for enlightened being, but it means it's really a translation into English of Yidam, which means not just any enlightened being, but an enlightened being for whom there's a highest yoga tantra practice. There's countless, which again is sort of this distinction. When you're thinking of just Dharmakaya mind, then you can be thinking of, well, the perhaps billions of past sentient beings who've achieved enlightenment, just like I might achieve enlightenment in this life or in some future lifetime. Any sentient being, when they achieve enlightenment, they achieve Dharmakaya mind. And so you're just sort of thinking about it in that term, whereas a yidam is a specific enlightened being for whom on our planet there are sadhanas, there are practice texts that are highest yoga tantra in nature. And that grouping is relatively narrow. Then you're talking about, there's, less than a dozen major figures like that and in total. And then of course it depends on specific enlightened beings. There can be more than one aspect of that particular deity that's still, so it gets complicated, but it's this relatively small number. Even if you look at the totality of all of the different highest yoga tantra practices among all of the four major schools, and then even the kind of variations, it's it's a couple dozen maybe in total. It's not a huge number. So in that sense, you're really trying to, so then that gets at like practicing pure view and clear appearance, which is related to highest yoga tantra. So you're uniquely then actually trying to, when you see your tantric master, you're trying to see them literally in the same form body as the yidam that you're practicing. So whatever that is, whether it's, doesn't Haruka or Kalachakra or, in the sadhana, it will describe what that enlightened being looks like. And then you're literally trying to cultivate the view that that is the actual nature of your tantric master. Um, so So, what Lama Zopa is pointing out here is really the difference is not in the purity of their mind, because, of course, even if it's just Dharmakaya mind, you're still, of course, a fully enlightened being is beyond training, beyond mistakes, and so on. But you don't, as he mentioned, you're not actively stopping ordinary appearance. But on the Vajrayana level, you're going just a little bit further and you're actually stopping just actual ordinary physical appearance. You're trying to train in, by virtue of understanding what that enlightened being looks like through the sadhana practice, you're literally trying to stop ordinary appearance from appearing. And there's many examples of practitioners actually, having these visions of their guru in those forms due to the force of their practice and their guru devotion, of course. Any questions about that? Okay. So then day 58, in a way, maybe day 58 is helping us to answer some of the questions that have come up about the sort of mechanism, in a way, of guru devotion. Because Lama Yeshe here, now I haven't said his name, it's been a lot of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, but Lama Yeshe is the originator of the quote on day 58. He says, the really qualified teacher puts nuclear energy into our heart. Lama Yeshe lived, he taught mainly, the bulk of his teaching was in the 70s and early 80s. So there's a lot of, and he taught hippies. So there was a lot of concern about like nuclear energy back then and the atomic bomb. And so he uses the word nuclear like a lot in his teachings, because it was sort of, you just find in all of his teachings the word nuclear, which is kind of antiquated from 2022 2023 perspective. We don't use that in the same way, but I think it was because of the 70s and the early 80s, kind of all of the talk of nuclear energy and the power plants and things that were going up all around the world. So he says, by practicing guru yoga, by seeing the totally positive qualities of the guru, we can let our negative perceptions go. So as we were talking about before, when you're not practicing guru devotion, then you're seeing the guru as just another person, just like me, just like my neighbor, just like like someone maybe who's studied, who has scriptural knowledge, but you're not seeing them as qualitatively different than yourself. But when you are practicing guru devotion, then they are qualitatively different, because you're training and seeing them as fully enlightened. He says, by practicing guru yoga, we learn to understand that in reality, the guru is inseparable from the compassion and wisdom of the deity. And then we start to see the inseparability of these qualities and ourselves. Another way of saying this is that guru yoga practice gives us the inspiration to develop our own human potential. So it's kind of like that they're the framework, that they're showing us, they are the example. And by recognizing that the Buddha, the historical Buddha, wasn't some sort of aberration, it wasn't just like, okay, well, yes, there was one person and only one person, and there's no other enlightened beings, then we might not have, because this phrasing of nuclear energy, he's saying that if we can develop the mind that has strong confidence that this person, our own teacher, accomplished those goals, then we can see how the mind itself is not one with the afflictions that are operating in our own mind at present. And we can see how they are removable by training, and that simply that process of removing them will allow all of those perfected qualities to shine through when they're no longer obscured by the operation, by the delusions being operative in the mind. So, yeah.
It's almost, is it almost like saying, we should not see the guru as ourselves, but we should see the guru as what he can be.
Yeah, so the question is like, how do we, the question from the Gompa is, how do we see, like, what's the relationship between the outer, because they talk about, that one's teacher is kind of like the outer guru, and they talk about like sort of the outer guru and the inner guru. So I would say that it's a process of kind of, it changes over time, but the idea is that the outer guru demonstrates to us that the Dharma jewel, like the teachings, have the power to create Buddhas. That the methods that the Buddha taught have the that they are a reliable, powerful method for giving rise to enlightened beings. And And then eventually, we can begin more and more by developing realizations, by developing, realizations of a direct experience. Then we start to rely on our own wisdom more and more, rather than always having, we still need, until we're fully enlightened, of course, we still need the guru. But in the very beginning, we need the guru like for everything. But then as the guru begins to validate that we've achieved realizations of Lamrim and so on, then we can have confidence that we can begin to rely on our own wisdom too. Of course, we always need to rely on the wisdom that we've developed. The more clear wisdom that we are developing, the more and more that can also serve as a guide. And then we move in the direction of embracing kind of the inner guru, which is our own realization of the Dharma jewel, the path that leads to, because eventually, when we achieve enlightenment, then we become the Buddha, we become the guru, ourselves. And that's the goal. It isn't that the guru is always something, it's not that it's unattainable, it's just the guru represents the end point of training, and we're just not at the end point yet. But eventually, we become the Buddha, we become the guru ourselves. So they're sort of just modeling that, just like Shakyamuni Buddha modeled it. Our own guru is just modeling that. And so, and then when we talk about the nature of mind being just clarity and awareness, we can see how that by putting the teachings into practice, we're not like adding something fundamentally new to the mind. We're just sort of countering mistaken ways of thinking. We are overcoming ways of thinking and perceiving that are faulty, and we're moving into a state of clarity and wisdom. And then the mind itself, free from delusion, is enlightened mind. It's because it's really ultimately just fundamental ignorance. The mind that apprehends a concretized self and a concretized everything else. The selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. That's the object that is ultimately causing all of our problems, our, everything, all of which we've said, the secondary and tertiary and, quadrary and all of the other delusions, they all simply are just a symptom of fundamental ignorance. And simply just removing fundamental ignorance from the mind allows the mind to be enlightened mind. He says, when we encounter such powerful good qualities, we see the possibility of having an everlasting good time, and we will definitely think, why not that, rather than confusion, and not just for ourselves, but to help all universal living beings. So again, this is just the idea that enlightenment, that ordinary existence and enlightenment are two states that nature allows sentient beings to exist in. Nature, that there is really only nature. The mind is a natural phenomenon. The mind can remain as ordinary mind, and nature permits mind to be developed into enlightened mind. And there are benefits, there are advantages to enlightened mind that don't exist within ordinary mind. And so why not? Like Lama Yeshe says, why not? Why, if there are advantages, if it's preferential to have those benefits and it's disadvantageous not to have them, then why not? What would prevent us from trying to accomplish that goal and seeing that those disadvantages are also applicable to all other sentient beings? Why not also try to assist, to be of benefit to them, to also encourage them to accomplish that simply preferential state between the two options? And then he kind of, Lama Yeshe just kind of further elaborates, I would say, in day 59, where he says a dry intellectual approach to spiritual matters leaves our heart untouched and unaffected. So he's talking here about just, if we simply approach the study, because when they talk about like studying Buddhism and, so on, and there are many, many books, but if it's only just that we know, okay, well, there's this list of 4 and there's this list of 16, and and we can recite all of that, but the kind of visceral existential condition of the suffering of sentient beings isn't really present, and we're not really motivated because of a deep, kind of felt experience, then we won't really make progress. We won't make any real genuine progress on the path if we just think of it like, I was going to say astrophysics only because I use like, because it's sort of in my mind, sort of obscure or, yeah. So, um, I'm just been using that example for many years. But if we just sort of think of it like studying Latin or whatever, like it's like, oh, this is just sort of something that I'd like to do, or it's what I do for my job. It's what I do to make a living. It's what I do to, but that's it. And then I do that, and I leave that, and then I do something else that I feel like is actually important. Like we do this like mathematics, like, oh, I'm going to get a math degree because I know I can get a lot of money, but it doesn't really interest me that much. Then, but for some other people, like the math does, like they go home and they're still doing math. They go home, like it really does excite them, and they see the benefits of it. And so he's saying that if we have just a surface level intellectual view, it will never really help. And again, he goes back to this idea of inspiration, seeing the guru as our source of inspiration. He says that we have to be convinced by a heartfelt living experience and effectiveness of the um, potent, the potency of the path, and that the guru demonstrates the potency of the path because, again, we recognize that a relative, that it's not impossible, that that it's people are all that people are doing is coming to understand the teachings and then putting effort into the teachings and then getting the results. And it isn't mystical, it's not that difficult. It takes time and it takes effort. Um, but if you think about all of the people that are willing to put in incredible time and effort to to be good, like at sports, or to be good at worldly things, people are waking up at 4 in the morning and practicing violin or ice skating, or for hours, and then they go to school and they come back, and again for hours they practice an instrument or they practice a sport, really just you know to develop a particular competency that they're going to have for a relatively short period of time. So you certainly trying to, meditation and study is certainly, of course, the job of overcoming the mind of self-cherishing. That's really, that's our ultimate task, and that as a resultant goal is incredibly much more difficult than being really good at ice skating or the violin. Um, but just in terms of hardship and in terms of what people will endure, um, it seems very doable that we can train our mind to be willing to put in the effort to accomplish this goal, given how easily people find it to. But again, here, what the thing that's different in a way is that those people are kind of practicing guru devotion with respect to Kobe Bryant, and they have their source of inspiration. They have the people that are demonstrating to them that in a relatively short period of time, with concerted effort and with dedication, you can get into the NBA, you can go to the Olympics, you can play a concert hall in whatever city, you know and so they're kind of relating to those celebrity figures and the people who've reached the pinnacle of those different careers, or and for them, that kind of the moistening of their mind and that kind of heartfelt um, willingness to undergo hardship is being provided to them in the same way, but just kind of for a goal that from the Buddhist perspective is kind of silly, because there's not much benefit in being a really good violinist or what have you. If it's something that you enjoy doing, then fine. There's not to say that you can't think of you know something as being an offering, or but putting an end to suffering forever, is kind of a loftier goal. Uh, So, he says, in the behavior of our own guru, we can see for ourselves the beneficial effects of training the mind in love and wisdom by thinking of our guru's lifetime devotion to others and their lack of self-cherishing, as well as the many other excellent qualities. And then by dissolving and absorbing the entire lineage of gurus into our heart, we are enabling these enlightened qualities to take deep root within us. So there he's kind of alluding to meditation practice, where you visualize the merit field, and like in the Guru Puja, or even could just be in your own practice, the preliminary practices that you find where you strongly visualize your guru in the merit field, and then you bring that to the crown of your head. And Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga and other practices like that, where you're doing that sort of thing. Did you have? Um, he says it's been the experience of generations of gurus and disciples that repeated practice of such visualizations, done in conjunction with the letting go of our concrete conceptions of self, has a profound effect on the mind, and can transform dry intellectual knowledge into an organic experience of insight. So again, here he's trying to encourage, I guess, sort of the formal practices of like Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, doing the Guru Puja, these different, and you can find in Lamrim texts, you can find descriptions of the merit field. I know that there's one in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. There's a really detailed visualization, and there's different ways. There's the full visualization is really kind of intimidating. I don't do. I mean, it's they say that Tibetan Buddhism is a very visual, has a many very visual practices, and even though we find them, even just visualizing Chenrezig or Tara, what have you, we might find that foreign and difficult at first, but they would say that it's just practice, that we can get to the point where the entire merit field or refuge, with all of the great masters, is something that we can hold in the mind in a very vibrant way. Because, when you look at like completion stage practice too, the incredibly complex visualizations that you have to hold in the mind for the highest yoga tantra practices. So it's also kind of preparing us for that too. These the visualization of merit field and so on. But like I said, we can definitely start with really, really simple visualizations, like visualizing Lama Tsongkhapa and visualizing Shakyamuni in the heart of Lama Tsongkhapa and visualizing one's own deity, or I'm sorry, one's own guru in the heart of Lama Tsongkhapa. So they call that like the union of the three, Lama Tsongkhapa, Shakyamuni, and then one's own guru. Kind of like Russian nesting dolls with the, in the hearts of, so that's a very simplified way of visualizing. Instead of visualizing the whole merit field, you visualize Lama Tsongkhapa and Lama Shakyamuni Buddha and one's own guru, kind of as inseparable, these three as being inseparable. It's the sort of easiest way to do it. And often in many sadhana practices, and in basically all sadhana practices, you try to cultivate the view of whatever, whether it's Tara or Chenrezig, as one's own guru in the aspect of Chenrezig, in the aspect of, because again, that's getting at that highest yoga, or that Vajrayana way of relating to the guru as being in the aspect. So we think that Tara is one's own guru manifesting as Tara in order to benefit us. Any thoughts or questions? Gosh, we might finish today. No, I'll probably finish next week on Monday. That I read, let's see, dry, intellectual. By thinking of our guru's lifetime of devotion to others and their lack of self-cherishing, as well as the many other excellent qualities our guru embodies, and then by dissolving and absorbing the entire lineage of gurus into our heart, we are enabling these enlightened qualities to take root deep within us. It has been the experience of generations of gurus and disciples that the repeated practice of such visualizations done in conjunction with our letting go of the concrete conceptions of self has a profound effect on the mind and can transform dry intellectual knowledge into an organic experience of insight.
Thank you. Now that after I listen to your commentary and hear that one, it makes more sense. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean the concept of the merit, visual, it's very important. It's in it actually, I mean, there's kind of, again, intimidating ideas, particularly in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, where Pabanka Rinpoche seems to
Be back. You stay here.
kind of link our ability to engage in this kind of practice
Come.
with our ability
Now.
to be successful in our practice. Like, if he talks about how if people aren't able to visualize the merit field well, then that will be like an obstacle to. So there is kind of an idea that that this idea of thinking of, because in the merit field, you've got like the whole lineage of, because in the merit field, you have these sort of two, you have Shakyamuni, and then you have these two kind of side trees in a way, and then they're showing the way that the teachings have progressed. And in the merit field, again, in particularly Pabanka Rinpoche's, actually, if you look at it, I mean, there should be a merit field here somewhere, but I don't know that. But it's kind of like it looks almost like there's just sort of a cloud of figures in these two lineages of the wisdom wing and or the method side and the compassion side. But actually, if you read a description of the merit field, every single one of these like tiny figures is a historical pandit or great practitioner, or and that's why the merit field is exactly the way that it is. It's not meant to just sort of be symbolic, or it's almost like the biblical sort of like this person begat this person, and it's kind of like that, but for the transmission 2600 years ago up through, I guess, essentially Lama Tsongkhapa. I mean, it's continued since then, but not in terms of the action, not in terms of the way that they talk about the merit field. Then you have you have all of these great masters that you're meant to be able to, like, I mean, literally could be 100 or so different individual people that historically actually existed and actually played a critical role for transmitting the teachings from the generation, through the generations down to the present day. So, of course, one's own guru plays a primary role in that too, but there's great reverence for the idea of, in Tibetan Buddhism, of really learning about the merit field, and about learning how to visualize it in that complex way over time. And we do that in the same exact way that we learn to visualize even just one figure correctly, which is just repetition. We When you're trying to visualize Shakyamuni correctly or Tara, you read the visualization, and then you might decide, okay, I'm going to really focus on this aspect today. I'm going to focus on just the face today. And for a week or 2 weeks, it's like, of course you're doing your best to like have the whole thing, but really you're focusing on just the face. And then the rest of it's kind of indistinct. It's kind of like it's there, but it's not there sharply. So and then once, at some point, the face will always be there, really clearly, very detailed, very vibrant, every time you do it. And then great, like now you can go down in like the torso and the arms, and you try to get that, and then eventually that will join the face, and they'll both be really, really stable. And then eventually the entire description is there every single time, really clearly, really vibrantly. But it takes months or a year of every single day trying to do that, even just for one figure. So of course it would be, and some people find it easier or more natural than other people. um, so it might take one person more or less time than someone else, but just by deciding that you're going to kind of break it down into pieces, eventually you will be able to hold that entire merit field in your mind, and then bring it to the crown of your head and absorb kind of the blessings of the lineage in that way. Yeah, and then day 60 kind of goes back to what we were talking about, the kind of the inner and outer guru, where Lama Yeshe says we need somebody to teach us how to find the answers from within ourselves. So this is again the process of cultivating and deepening and growing our own wisdom, and then eventually more and more being able to use that as a reliable guide, because we've gotten this realization and that realization, um, and now that we have those that's what's different about the Buddha than us, is that all of those realizations have been accomplished. And now we're kind of getting one, and then we're getting another, over time, after, independence upon calm abiding and so on, like we've said. Um, but he's saying that the guru has two levels of meaning. The relative objective guru is the teacher who, by communicating, allows us to discover our own totality. Um, but then he says, on a deeper level, the guru is our own inner wisdom, the fundamental clarity of mind. So that's the guru. So we're sort of on the process of uncovering enlightened mind, is the process of uncovering the inner guru, by because they talk about how for us at the very beginning the mind is just totally full of delusion. All of the time delusion arises very easily. It persists for long periods of time. It's a very intense experience. um, but then we begin to sort of poke holes in that, by tamping down on the delusions. And by doing that, more and more, the natural clarity of mind is able to be expressed, because the delusions have been counteracted in small ways and then bigger and bigger ways over time. He says, there's only so much that the external guru can do for us. They can't guarantee that we gain insight and realizations, but our inner guru, our own clear wisdom, can accomplish everything. The practice of guru yoga, therefore, is primarily a method for learning how to listen to this inner guru. So, it's kind of like in the, the quotation where the Buddha says, that he can't put realizations into our own mind. All that, you know even a fully enlightened being, all they can do is point the way to what needs to be done. They can explain, okay, well, it's like this, and then it's like, but they can explain all of that to us, just like um, thinking of the Buddha as a physician. They can give us the prescription, they can hand us the medication, but if we don't take it, then it doesn't matter. Then yes, we've heard the right thing to do, we're aware of the right thing to do, but we're not actually doing it. So there's very little value in knowing something but not actually internalizing it. So it's kind of every time that we remember the teachings, every time that we are able to act from a place of, relative truth rather than the delusions, then we're kind of building up. Because right now our minds are kind of not so trustworthy, because what they want is, like if we could, we'd have, breakfast, or we'd have, dessert for dinner, and, but, and the 20s are just kind of something that we survived, by some miracle, we kind of made it through, but still, we're just not so reliable, in our minds, but we develop greater and greater inner wisdom, inner reliability, and then we're able to rely on that. Um, yeah. Okay, so that's enough for today. It's a lot. Any questions, thoughts?
I have a question.
Mhm.
So does that mean that all the people in the lineage tree are those things that you're taught on like individually, like each of those figures?
What do you mean by taught on?
Like would your guru explain like what each figure is and who they are? Or would it be like just like this is their name? This is what they look like?
Um, I would say that, I mean, there's probably so many that, like there's the 16 like pendants, and those are particularly, like their actual accomplishments, those are more so emphasized. But I think that there's so many um, that, you kind of, you're aware of like whether it's the method side or the wisdom side. And, but I mean, there's key figures, but otherwise, I think it's it's not. You certainly don't have to memorize like extensive biographies, and I think it's kind of in the sense that it seems to me that it's kind of in the sense that um, because they're enlightened, then you're making a connection even just through the visualization, and then you're kind of invoking that energy, just like you don't necessarily know everything that Tara did, or everything that all of the medicine Buddhas did, or all of the deeds of Chenrezig, but by learning the visualization and really focusing your mind on it, because enlightened mind pervades everything, um, then in some sort of subconscious way, even if it's not intellectual, that energy is actually, there's a connection, there's sort of a energetic connection that transcends, I think, the kind of intellectual way of thinking about, all of the. So I would say that it's mostly about just being able to just visualize clearly, and then with the key figures, having more detail. Um, like Nagarjuna, and I mean, there's certainly key figures in that that are really important, particularly important. Anything else? Okay. All right. So we'll dedicate. So we will recollect our altruistic motivation and think that by listening and participating in the course, we actualized our motivation, which has created positive energy in the mind, and that positive energy, by virtue of karma, will ripen as a beneficial effect or circumstance happening. So we want to visualize that happening in the most expansive way that we can, thinking of it as being the energy that liberates all sentient beings from suffering. So try to just very strongly visualize giving away the fruit of one's practice and thinking that it ripens in incredibly vast and beneficial ways. All right. So we have Venerable Rubina's retreat this weekend. So that's great. I hope everybody can come virtually, what have you. And yeah, we'll meet again on Monday.